Hi there. Welcome to Flip the Script Season 3 in the Weeds, Episode 4, No-Shows, 7 Ways to Prevent Them, and an email to send if they do happen. My name is Becc. I'm going to be your guide for today's session. If you do me a favor first, no, I don't want you to go subscribe to anything. If you go to flipthescript.co, and on the left-hand side, if you would click Free Sales Training Hub, and then click Season 3, Episode 4, and download the deck so you can have the slide deck in front of you at each step of the way. So let's go ahead and jump on in. So the first thing that I would be thinking about to drive no-shows down or decrease no-shows is to have a reputation with your prospect of being someone who drives value. So everything you do, everything you don't do, everything you say, everything you don't say communicates something to your prospect or anyone in general. So we usually have a building perception of someone, when they've done something once or done something, 2, 3, 4, or 5 times, we remember that. And so I would have a reputation and seek to have a reputation that every single time this person comes to deck or comes across you, then they know that they're going to get value. So this should help, if from the get-go, let's say in the prospecting phase, you're constantly sending over articles, you're sending over content that would be really helpful to them, you're prepping them for the discovery meeting that they agreed to, you're sending over materials to the other decision makers that will be on the call, you're, best preparing them for the meeting, bringing all the data points that you can, doing your homework and research, then it reassures your buyer that, or prospective buyer, that when they show up to this discovery call, if they do, they know that you're someone who typically does not waste their time and drives value. So it's probably going to be a smart idea to jump on the discovery call with you. Here's some examples of value that you can add. So I put a decently exhaustive list here, but I would start from the top and then go down. Client, if you send them a client, a network introduction, some type of gift, non-company related events, a community that they can be a part of, an idea of how to do something, an intro to someone that they need, book list, podcast, webinar, articles. Some of these are obviously more scalable than others, but this is just an exhaustive list of all the types of value that I'm thinking about whenever I'm sending things over to my buyer. So I would focus here on things that are not company related, meaning they're not a quote unquote win for you. It shouldn't be content that's proving your use case, but content that helps their day in general. And this is when you'll really drive the narrative home that regardless of the situation, you're constantly someone that's adding value to the game so that they want to show up for the discovery call to see what you have to say. The second tip on preventing no-shows, not answering all of their questions or to the full extent of what they would want hypothetically answered. And hear me out as to why. The more questions that you answer of your prospect, certainly in depth, on a cold call. Number one, this is a cold call. You got to keep in mind, this is a mini discovery. You've called them out of the blue, and I think it's very inappropriate almost to have a 30, 45-minute conversation. So in the same regard, I would not go into any type of answers to the questions, because typically if they're asking you questions, 2 things are happening. If you give them an answer, you're giving them a non-prescriptive answer, meaning you probably haven't at this point asked them enough questions to understand their background or their situation so you can appropriately answer. So a lot of prospects will want to know pricing, heaven forbid, or they'll want to know different features to products, or they'll want to know how you competitively differentiate. And the reality is that you don't know what features and benefits you don't know what features or products or the pricing would hypothetically be, because at this point you don't know what you're solving for. So you need to uncover within discovery the problems that they're running into, how egregious those problems are, how those are impacting their organization, what type of problem is it? Is it a problem with the tool? Is it a problem with the process, etc.? And all of that is done within in-depth discovery. So if you haven't done discovery yet, then I would, venture to say that answering any questions around like what products they should use essentially is malpractice. So if I don't know what problem you're trying to solve for and I try to prescribe a solution, then this is going to be a situation where I might get the answer right, but I'll probably get the answer wrong. So point being, when they ask you these questions, I would in no regard, certainly on a cold call, feel the need to answer them. So number one, obviously, like we just covered, you might be diagnosing the wrong thing and prescribing the wrong thing. But number two, this means if they're asking questions and you're answering questions, it means by code that they're not the ones that are talking. So on a cold call, the one thing that you should be hungry for is your prospect talking. You want to know the information of what's going on with their account, what's going on with their company, etc. And so if they're asking you questions and you're answering them, this means that you're not getting discovery on them and the information that matters to them. So if they ask questions, I wouldn't answer certainly to the full extent, and I would do my best to try to flip the conversation back into one about them, so that you're getting the information that you need to make some type of diagnosis. Number three, very similar to two, but I'd say don't give it all away. So I in the past have gotten super excited about, different features that I had to offer, different, products that I had to offer. And sometimes, when my prospects would ask me about something, I would give them the full meal. And so I would try to choke back some of the meal. Again, this is a cold call situation. So really the cold call's goal is to alpha test, is there some type of problem that they're running into that you can solve for? And then to schedule the time for the deeper discovery. This is not a situation where you should be having an extensive conversation. Again, this is a cold call. So the goal is to get them into a deeper discovery call where you can do more appropriate discovery. So I'd say a tip on how to do that is to not give everything away. The fourth tip is I would try to drive some type of prospect buy-in so that they don't no-show you. So driving prospect buy-in, and I've gone into this in a couple of different sessions, but driving prospect buy-in or some level of investment is going to be very important to get them to show up on the next call. So interdependence theory is a great example of this. And interdependence theory is basically a theory on how we relate to others. There are 6 different variables that we evaluate on whether we're going to continue on in a relationship. There is fear of loss, scarcity, urgency, your level of satisfaction, your amount of alternatives, and investment. And by and large, by a vast majority, investment is going to be the most heavily considered item that you're going to think about on how much you have pre-invested in a situation, on whether when you're evaluating on whether you should continue moving forward. So this is one piece of it, but another factor that's coming into play is what we call the Benjamin Franklin effect. So Benjamin Franklin effect is essentially, back in the day, Benjamin Franklin had an idea. He had an enemy that was a rival legislator, and he essentially wanted to befriend this person or make the rivalry not so bad. So he had an idea of, why don't I ask him a favor and see if that drives some level of investment, and that drives some level of friendship between us. Kind of an odd idea. So he asked him for a very rare book that he had in his collection. The legislator said yes. He read the book and kept it for about a month, and he said that the next time that he saw this legislator, that the dynamic had changed. He was more open to talk to him, he was more open to be friends, and they started to have a friendly relationship from there. So point being, both of those theories are going to point you to the fact that driving some type of buy-in from your prospect is going to make it much more likely that they're going to continue investing. So on the cold call, the amount that they've invested is relatively small to some degree. Like, they have invested the time that they let you pitch. They've invested a lot of information that maybe they've offered up to you on the call, but you want to increase that as much as you can so it's more likely that they'll jump on the next call. So how you can drive prospect buy-in. This is the back end of the cold call. If you want to see more of the cold call script, if you go into the section written on the Flip the Script website, and you can download the 7 steps to an electrifying cold call. This is the end of it. So after I take them through a question portion, I then back out with saying, well, I know that I called unannounced. Do you have your calendar handy? And they'll say, handy for what? I'll say, how does Tuesday at 2 look? They'll say, Tuesday at 2 for what? Again, this is the back half of the call. So if you want to see more on this, you can either go into written or into the cold call session in the core sessions. But essentially, they'll say, Tuesday at 2 for what? And I'll say, let me repeat this back to you so I make sure that I got this right. and I'll give them an overview or a summary of all the details that I learned within that question portion. You have a team of 75 reps, you want them to have more effective cold calls. You have a couple of top performers. You're not really sure why they're top performers or what's driving all that conversion. Tuesday at 2, I want to hear more about that and see where you're headed and if it makes sense on where we might be able to fit into support. And then I would drive for the buy-in. I'd give them a prospect pact. At the end of the day on Tuesday, I promise we won't be the team that hammers you with emails if we're not a fit. What else? What else would you like to add to the agenda? And I would encourage them as much as you can to get them to add items into the agenda. So this is going to do a couple of things. Number one, it's going to increase their investment, which makes it more likely that they will show up to the following meeting. Number two, it'll give you a good litmus test on how serious they are about a meeting so you can surface any false objections. If they just planned on scheduling the call on Friday at 2, or Tuesday at 2 and then not showing up or ghosting you, you'll hear them stutter a lot at this portion of the call. But number three, if they don't show up to the meeting, you can then do something about it. So you can say, hey, wanted to follow up. Sorry, I missed you on the call earlier. Did I mess up something? Last time that we talked, we had uncovered that you wanted to cover X, Y, and Z. So this is a great portion to do that is right here. If you could drive some type of prospect buy-in by getting their information or some type of investment of what they want to cover on the call. And then you can close the call out. So this is going to be a great way to drive investment in prospect buy-in so that you can increase the likelihood that they will show up to the meeting. Over email, a very similar technique, but this is essentially the language that I use, but it's looking forward to seeing you, anything you like to cover, if not, no worries. But I wanted to see what was top of mind for you. So this is after they've agreed to the meeting via email. I would again try and plug them for some type of information that they'd like to cover on the call so that it's more likely that they show up to the call. Another way to drive prospect buy-in, and again, this is going to be a heavy indicator of how serious they are and also going to drive buy-in that they, because they're investing something, have them bring something for the call. So if you notice that you have a lot of rapport on the cold call, with the prospect, then I would ask them to bring some type of data point. So again, any type of investment on their behalf is going to increase the likelihood that they're going to keep investing by showing up to the second call. So if you can have them bring, a data point, or sometimes I'll have people bring an email sample or, some things that are minor, some things that are, take a little bit more time. But I would try to get them to bring something to the discovery call or to the next call so you get kind of mini yeses and mini wins along the way so that it encourages them to keep going. So again, interdependence theory in our minds, it's going to tell us that we don't want to have done everything for nothing. So we will keep going in a situation dependent most heavily on how much we've invested. So a great example of this, I just got back from Vegas. I got to present at the MGM Grand for an SKO. And it's really jarring to watch. And I've been this person where you sit down at the slot machines, you put in a couple of quarters, and you keep going even though you've lost. And part of the reason that people keep going, a lion's share of it is dopamine. So dopamine is going to be triggered whenever you achieve a goal or you get close enough to achieving a goal, very, very close to achieving a goal, but you don't actually achieve it. Both are going to release the same amount of dopamine within your brain. But the second piece is when we've invested, a quarter, 2 quarters, $1, $10, $5, $20, $50, $100, it increases in our mind that we don't want to have invested everything for nothing. So you'll see another great example is when people have been doing a workout plan for, let's say, a year, 2 years, 3 years, and they all of a sudden find out that workout plan or that diet plan for whatever reason actually is hurting them, not helping them. You'll see some part of the population, I've talked to a lot of dietitians about this, oddly enough, that they will, about 40% will continue on working out that way, even though they have the information that it's not effective. And the reason that they do that is because they have invested so much in that workout so far that they don't want it to all have been for nothing. So they justify in their head, no, this workout is really helping me out, even though they have the data that it's not. So if you can have a prospect bring something to the call, any type of investment, this is going to increase the likelihood that they're going to show up to the meeting. The second to last tip here is going to be pattern interrupting. So I use this as a more deep technique. If I am on the phone with someone and I notice and I'm like, okay, this feels like a false objection, meaning they're saying yes to a meeting because they want to get me off the phone, but I feel like they don't plan on showing up on Friday, then I would pattern interrupt right there. So there's nothing that a good pattern interrupt cannot solve for. So how you can do this, and I go into this in a couple of different episodes, primarily season 3, episode 2, I believe, on objection handling. But I would use some type of off-record pattern interrupt. Can I level with you? Can I say something? May I be candid? Can we time out here for a second? Maybe it's me, but I get the feeling that, and I would essentially say whatever you think is happening in the room. So at this case scenario, you've noticed that you think that this person is saying yes to a meeting because they're trying to get you off the phone. So I hear this all the time. Reps are calling in and they'll say, they'll try to give their pitch, and then the prospect will say like, oh, I'm actually running into a meeting. And they'll say, when's a better time to call? The prospect struggles. They're like, and then the rep will suggest something. How's Friday at 2? And the prospect always overwhelmingly agrees. They say, yes, thumbs up, let's do it. And if I had to guess why, it's not because they're excited to show up Friday at 2. It's they're excited that they're getting rid of this rep and they have no plans of showing up Friday at 2. So if you notice this on the phone and you think that it's a false objection, I would have the temerity to call it out. So there's, again, the key here is going to be that you're emotionless, but that you say, can I level with you? Maybe it's me. Or, I don't know. I'm getting the feeling that. It feels like to me that. And you can say whatever the truth is. Maybe it's me, but I'm getting the feeling that, like, my pitch wasn't that good. You're really not that interested. And maybe you're just agreeing to a time on Friday, because you really want me to go away because I had a bad pitch. It was the worst pitch you've heard in your life. Did I get that right? And when you interrupt that pattern, you'll hear prospects start laughing, and then they'll tell you the truth. They'll say, like, yeah, you did get that right. Because you've just cracked out of the pattern of what most people would accept and most people would say as a sales rep. So this is a great way to decrease no-shows, because it essentially prevents the no-shows from happening. So again, this is going to be marketed on how well you can read the situation. So I would pattern interrupt and try to surface any false objections within there. Send content, value, meeting reminders, everything before the meeting. This is a great way to decrease no-shows. So again, the more that people feel that you've invested. So attachment theory is a great example of this. I can't go into it too deeply now, but essentially it's a theory on how we attach to others, our work, etc., regardless of the type of relationship, based on how we were raised. And essentially within attachment theory, it will show you that usually when you invest more in people, specifically for the avoidant attachment style and the secure attachment style, who will match, or an avoidant, well, you'll need to overinvest and they'll underinvest. You need to show your prospect that you're investing in them to marquee to them that it's okay for them to invest back. So I'd send content, value, meeting reminders, but basically marquee to your prospect that you're looking forward to this meeting, that you're sending everything you can to make it happen, so they believe that they're okay to go ahead and invest the time back by showing up to the meeting so that you won't waste it. And then the last one here is I would include my boss on the call and make sure that the prospect is aware of that. So they're going to be less likely to quote unquote waste your time if they know that someone important is on the call. So usually you'll tease out a lot of false objections. I would say, hey, I hope that it's not going to weird you out. Actually, what my leader wanted to be included on this call and wanted to meet you. Looking forward to Tuesday where we can unpack X, Y, and Z of whatever you had discussed that you were going to discuss on the discovery call. But this is a great way to show your prospect that you're investing, you're even having your leader on the call, so that they're more likely to, at minimum, kind of call out their false objection there, but usually this is going to increase the likelihood that they're going to want to show up to the call. Oh, and then the last one here, this is going to be the email to send if they do no-show. So this is all of the tips previously beforehand, 1 through 7, on how to prevent it from happening. Number 8 is going to be an email to send if they do no-show. So let's assume, regardless of how good of a playbook you run, even if you're sending over content reminders or sending over content in the meantime, building value with them, sending over meeting reminders, including your leader on the call, calling out false objections, you're still going to get some. So this is the email that I would send if they do no-show, is I would send something kind of like I mentioned earlier, where you say like, you want to effectively fall on your sword and then mention whatever they wanted to cover earlier. So this will only work if you've gotten over email or over call something they wanted to cover on the agenda. But I would send something to the degree of, hi Keenan, sorry I missed you on the call earlier. Just wanted to make tuck my head in to make sure that I didn't mess up, ? Last time we talked, I know that you wanted to go through X, Y, and Z, so I wanted to make sure I didn't drop the ball anywhere. Either way, I appreciate you scheduling the call with me, and I hope all is well, and I would sign it. So essentially, you just want to fall on your sword and say, I want to make sure that I didn't mess something up. You want to be very, very careful not to put accountability on them for missing the meeting. So I'd be very careful with my language of, sorry, I missed you on the call earlier, as opposed to saying like, where were you? Why didn't you show up to the call? So that you infuse guilt and accountability to them. So I'd say, sorry, I missed you on the call earlier. Just want to make sure, tuck my head in and make sure that I didn't mess up. Last time we talked, and I would go into whatever they say that they wanted to cover in that call. Either way, I appreciate the time again, and let me know if, and hope all is well, and then I would sign it. So that's the email that I would send roughly whenever they do no show is, making sure that you didn't mess up, falling on your sword near the beginning, making sure you don't put accountability on them, and then saying, last time we talked, I know you wanted to cover X, so I just wanted to make sure that I didn't drop the ball, because given this, I thought that you wanted to cover this, so I'm assuming that I'm the one that messed up. So that is everything. In summary, I know no-shows can be really crippling. It's really fun when our prospects agree to a meeting. We need to just make sure that we get them into the meeting. So those are the 7 tips and the email to send if they do. I hope that this was helpful. Turning no-shows into a dismal rate is a very easy game. It's just about staying ahead of the cuff and adding content and value at each stage of the game. So thank you so much for watching. If you like this session, you want to hear more, if you go to flipthescript.co, and we have a number of different sessions on anything and all things sales. And if you really like this session, if you want to go to Flip the Script on LinkedIn, we put out about 3 tips or quick bits every single week. But either way, thanks so much for giving us the privilege of your time today, and I hope you have a great rest of your day prospecting. Watch out.